Welcome back to the show, Amber. It's a pleasure to have you back again on Unabashed You.
It is wonderful to be here. I so enjoyed the last time.
As did I. And we follow each other on Instagram. So it's interesting how you
Hmm.
feel like you stay connected with somebody that you don't actually necessarily have a face-to-face conversation with in real life,
Hmm.
much less on, sort of technology here on Zoom, but it is wonderful to see you. So let's get to know you a little bit better here.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know me, I just got a little playful, fun way to get to know somebody a little better. Is there a current show that you're watching that you're enjoying?
Well, I have not been doing a lot of show watching, but there is one show I really like historical or almost like period pieces, Victorian, stuff like that, Regency sometimes, like in terms of historical stories about real people.
Oh,
So one of the ones that has been interesting, I think there was like a new season that came out recently, The Empress.
oh, that sounds
Um,
familiar, but I don't think I've
yeah,
seen it.
it's
Okay.
it's about a young royal empress who I think her name's Elizabeth, and she marries an emperor, and then it's just kind of about all the struggles, in terms of living in the court and trying to be a family and etc. So yeah,
Oh,
that's been one. Yeah.
okay. Well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out now that I've talked to
Hmm.
somebody who's actually seen
Very,
it. Sometimes you just kind of
yeah.
slide by and you're like, I don't know. I don't know. And then just
Hmm.
keep going to the next one, but there you go. How about
Yeah.
a crush? Did you have a crush on anybody growing up?
Um, I I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay.
But in terms of thinking about growing up and crushes, not really crushes, but I think of like maybe some shows I watched,
Okay, sure.
so like I mean, I'm Full House for one, or the one that had like Steve Urkel.
Oh
What was
yeah,
that
what
one
was that one
called?
called? I don't remember. I
Um,
don't
I can't
remember.
remember. Prin Bella Prince, yeah, Bel
Yeah.
Air or something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Okay, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Fresh Prince of
That's
Bel Air. Yeah,
okay. That's all
exactly.
right.
Yeah. So like,
Okay.
I can think of some of those in terms of watching,
Right.
just kind of fun interactions or yeah, sitcoms,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting how, as growing up, some of those shows add to who we are and who we want to be, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the thing you are most afraid of? And this can be like completely irrational
Mm-hmm.
or deep and dark. I think of it as kind of a irrational, but then some people go deep and dark. So I don't, there are no wrong answers,
Mm.
I guess is another way
Okay.
to say that.
Yeah, so kind of, I guess in sort of really in the writing space and putting yourself out there space, um, finding out that I was an Enneagram 1, wing 9, this fear made a lot of sense. The fear of being judged or being misunderstood and
Oh
not
my
being able to explain
gosh.
yourself.
Oh
So
my
yeah, so
gosh.
that's a fear. But
That
one that you have to overcome, in terms of not
is
everyone's gonna understand you, and that's okay. So,
right. And it's
yeah.
so interesting that you mentioned the Enneagram. I too, I have two tied number ones, and one of mine is number one. And
Okay.
as in first place, Enneagram one. And this is one of my biggest things too, is being
Mm.
I have such a drive to be understood. I mean, once you
Mhm.
understand me, if you need to move on or whatever, that's fine, but I want to at least be understood. So I can really relate
Mhm.
to what you're saying. I feel like she's talking. I mean, she's totally speaking my language here. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
What is your other number that you're
Uh,
tied for? And
eight.
oh,
That
really?
sort of just
Okay. The
protective
challenger. The
challenger, protective
challenger. Yeah.
challenger. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is such an interesting model, and it rings so true in so many ways. What's a random fact most people wouldn't know about you?
A random fact, and you probably can't see it in the video, but I have two different colored eyes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
like completely different colors. So when I was little, there are pictures where one eye was blue and the other was brown. And now if you look, I have a green eye and a brown eye. So yeah.
Wow, and they even changed. The blue one went green.
Yeah, so it's called
Yeah.
like dichromatic. Yeah. Yeah,
See, now
that's yeah,
most people
that's
would not know that, right?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, I would imagine it's not all that common.
I know of two movie stars that have it, but yeah. Yeah.
Right. One, I can think of one blonde. I can't think of her
Kate
name.
Kate Beckinsale, maybe?
Oh, no, no, that wasn't what
No?
I was thinking of. Somebody else.
Okay, someone else. And
Yeah,
that
somebody
might not
else.
be the right name, but yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, that is really unusual. I mean,
Yeah.
I if I had to guess what color your eyes were, I wouldn't, brown would not even be in
Mm-hmm.
the guessing. It would, because
Hmm.
they appear lighter
Yeah.
and
I
not
don't
brown.
know if I can come
Let's
close.
Oh wow.
Maybe
Okay.
you see it a little
Yes.
bit, like with lighting or different colored
Yes. Oh
shirts
my
and whatnot.
gosh.
Yeah,
That's
sometimes it'll
so
be
interesting.
striking. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Oh,
neat how like God like adds bits of uniqueness to each of us.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Now, what advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Mm.
Go back to like fifth grade-ish
Hmm.
time, and what would you tell that 10-year-old Amber?
Yeah. To not wish away any years. Um,
Uh,
Yeah, because I remember, and I mean, yeah, being an 80s kid or whatnot, but in the summer, maybe like laying in the grass and not having a lot to do and like, oh well, when I'm this age I can do this, and when I'm that age, and so like you begin to wish you were older than you are, and then you don't begin to truly live in that age, and
right.
the gifts that you have in it. So yeah, I think
Oh,
that, yeah, don't wish away any years, because each year there is differences and goodness, and yeah,
right. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, that is so good. And I mean, I would go back to my 10-year-old self, and that would be one of the things, for
Mm-hmm.
sure, because you're right. You're thinking ahead, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to be this, and then I'm going to be there,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be there, and then I'm going to be there. And when you finally get there, like we have a 23-year-old, and she's so like, being
Mm.
couldn't wait to get there, and now she's there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
bills, responsibilities, all
Yes.
these things.
Yes.
Yes, you have the freedom, but you have all these other things that you
Mm-hmm.
have to take care of that are really
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
And you don't feel you can't see what the weight of those will be when you're young, you know?
True.
Like when you look ahead, it's like I can never go back to not having a lot on my plate, but
Right.
yeah, I hear you with your dog.
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Well, I think kindred spirits, two peas in a
Hmm.
pod. Oh my gosh. Okay, so as you know, I invited you back for our
Yeah.
Let's Talk About Mental Health series. So
Yes.
let's just kind of I know that we had a great conversation last time you were on, and we did actually touch on some of this, but we're going
Hmm.
to touch on it again, and have a conversation around it. A time of it's either struggling with mental health, not having a hard time achieving mental wellness, for you or a loved one. Tell us about that.
Hmm. So I have been a caregiver, so the primary support person for my husband through mental crisis. We had, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
We had almost a 2-year crisis period in
Mm.
terms of fighting for life and fighting against suicidality and suicide. And then we had a um, however many years later from that, another bout, another like suicidality relapse. So yeah.
Now, and I do remember that from your story, and I wanted you to be
Mhm.
able to say it in your own words.
Yeah.
2 years, I mean, on the one hand, it doesn't sound like very long, but on the other hand, it sounds like forever when you're in the
Mhm.
midst of this kind of battle. And I'm
Yep.
imagining battle might be one of the words that one would use to describe what it was that you went through, just a constant, everyday
Yeah.
battle.
Yeah.
And then when it came back that second time, were you I'm thinking if it were me, I would think, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is back. I thought we already
Mhm.
went through that. Did you have any of that?
Um, so to go back to what you were first saying in terms of, probably having to walk through it, you say almost 2 years, but then when you're walking through it, it can feel long. With that, I would say absolutely, because one of the things I wanted to share is when you find out that that you are struggling with like significant mental health issues and thoughts of suicide, or you find out your loved one is struggling with that, you don't know how long that's going to last.
Mm,
And so for me, when I found out that my husband did have thoughts of suicide and was struggling with that. I didn't know if it was going to be a day, or if it was going to be like 3 months, a year, 5 years, forever. I didn't know
oh,
how long it was going to go on. And and so just trying to walk through it bit by bit,
oh,
is
that's good.
incredibly important, so that you can, um, almost have that endurance to keep going. Because you're, as you said, it's a battle, and you are working for life, and you're fighting for life, and it's just each day, each moment, that you are fighting in that.
And how long did, I mean, how did you even in practical terms get to that, like, not just philosophy, but that reality of like the bit by bit part? Because
Mhm.
that when you're, like you say, when you enter into it, you're thinking, oh my gosh, how long will this struggle, this battle be going on?
Mhm.
I mean, did you find other people or resources? Or I mean, I know you have a very strong faith, which I know
Mhm.
helped tremendously. Tell me about that.
In terms of going through it, so I mean, to back up, I didn't know that he dealt with thoughts of suicide when I found out that he was dealing with PTSD, because he
Okay.
didn't tell me at first.
Okay.
He wasn't, I think, he was telling me about the nightmares that he was having from
Right.
combat trauma. But when I asked him, and again, when your loved one is struggling with something serious, to ask those questions,
Okay.
and to make sure to ask that question of, I just want to ask, have you had any thoughts of harming yourself, or any thoughts
Uh,
of suicide? And then they'll tell you whether yes or no. And then if they said no, in emphasizing that, hey, just let me know, please, if you do. So anyhow, it was a couple months period between those two. But yeah, I didn't, I could, yes, I said endurance and having endurance in it, but and not knowing how long it was going to last. But in finding out that he had, that he was fighting suicide and fighting against thoughts of suicide, it was really a every day in the thick of it. Every day, checking in with him and choosing to be a support without being overbearing. Finding out if he had any increased stressors in his life, things that could increase risk of,
right.
of feeling overwhelmed and then not knowing what to do with it, and then beginning to head down, like a suicide thought pathway.
Right.
And so it was just a slow, um, arduous, everyday walk, I guess. And in being a caregiver of suicidality, and suicidality, that term kind of encompasses anything that would have to do with suicide. So suicidal thoughts, ideation, intention, attempts, etc. But caregiving for that is just it's slowly checking in and
Checking in. That's very
yeah,
good.
checking in, And then also being aware. So like researching and educating myself was very important to educate myself on what even to look for, signs of suicide or increased risk so that I could hopefully identify if there was one, uh,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and know what to do.
Did you ever feel, I mean, of course I insert myself into this, thought process of, gosh, how would I deal with that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just wondering, did you at any point feel responsible? I mean, for the
Mhm.
outcome? I mean, I don't know
Yes.
how you work around that.
Yes. Yes. um, yes, it's an all-consuming um battle because you're you're fighting against death all the time.
Mhm.
You're facing death, and death is almost like taunting you, if you will.
Right.
It's there and it's present. In terms of feeling responsible, um, not wanting to miss something. Yeah,
Ah,
was a huge piece, in terms of caregiving against suicide and not and not being able to get in my husband's head and know beyond a shadow
yeah,
of a doubt,
right.
you can ask, but they have to choose to tell you. And so if
Right.
they don't tell you for whatever reason, then you don't want to miss anything. And so yeah, there was
Right.
definitely a sense of responsibility and not wanting to miss something and have it be, devastating.
Right. Well, that's such an important point that they have to choose to tell you. I mean, you can be as
Mhm.
supportive as you want. You can read books, do research, talk to people, all of that. But at the end of the day, if that loved one is not willing to be just a little bit vulnerable, a little bit transparent, and be forthcoming, even in the smallest way, for you to understand the reality, then it's you can't do it for him. I guess it's just like raising
Mhm.
kids, all these things that you want to impart in your children. And then again, there's still that fork in the road where they have to choose for
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm. And
Um,
I
Go
w-
ahead.
I will sorry, I would on that, I would say for someone who is walking this path right now, having working to keep trust present in that relationship is key so that hopefully, sharing with your loved one how much they matter, and speaking words of truth and life into them, but then also trying to be wise so that you can keep trust present so that, yeah, like you said, they will hopefully choose to tell you if they are struggling.
All right, and let's remind the listeners, the PTSD is because your husband served in our military. Can you tell us,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
what branch and his tours of duty or what have you?
Um, so I kind of
Or,
only
or
touched
not, or
briefly.
not.
Yeah, I touched briefly. So he was in the Air Force, and he served, yeah, and he was
Okay.
deployed, and a buddy died by IED explosion,
Oh,
and when he came home, he compartmentalized that. He didn't realize it was trauma. And
yeah,
then you fast forward many, many years later, and it began to basically torment him in these nightmares that he couldn't get away from. And so he tried to fight against it on his own um,
right,
by, yeah, seeking out and, sleep medication or, what have you to try to help himself to be able to face sleep and face that. Yeah. And then I think he did that for about a year before I discovered um,
right,
and found out that he was struggling with this, and then I was able to come on board. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, I I'm just sitting here marveling at the walk that you two have had together and how God has used it for good. I,
Mhm.
I, those are the kind of things that only He can do. I mean, clearly, neither one of you would ever said, "Oh, okay, I'll volunteer for that duty." I mean, knowing knowing
No.
the cost, because the cost is so high. And
Mhm.
while obviously we thank him for his service, for anybody and everyone who serves in the military to, protect us, it does come at just a horrendous cost. And, in our lifetime and prior to our lifetimes, the world wars that have been,
Mhm.
there wasn't much talk
Mhm.
about what in those days the men went through. And,
Mhm.
they just came back, and I think a lot of times they drank a lot.
There
You
was, yeah, yeah. Well, and alcohol, and there are so many other things that we use as negative coping strategies, if you've heard
Right,
that term. Yeah, because you don't know how to handle all the emotional pain or whatever it is, and so then you turn to something, and it can be food, exercise, sex,
right,
workaholic, filling your schedule with everything so can't see, you know,
right.
can't face it or what have you. But yeah,
Well,
alcohol.
and it makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense for the human psyche in a way that he did compartmentalize it. Like, okay, I'm going to put all, it's awful, and I'm going to put it all here.
Hmm.
I'm going to tuck it away here. I mean, it makes sense in terms of survival, but then it doesn't make sense in terms of you didn't process it. You just put it away in a drawer.
Well, and with that, so trauma, and it's not even where you would be actively, consciously putting away in a drawer. With trauma, it is going to be stored in the limbic system, where
Oh,
subconscious thought is, specifically in the amygdala and hippocampus. And so it's stored where emotional memories are. And so, like, you can't even access those trauma memories. So, then for him, when it came up as nightmares, his his subconscious was beginning to bring it out, if you will. Yeah,
right,
you have to acknowledge, you have to acknowledge
right.
this, you have to face it. But yeah, I, through all the caregiving and different emergencies and whatnot, and I think we talked about this last time, but I also had trauma. And I also have PTSD. And so, it's you're caregiving and you are doing all of this. And then sometimes there is significant impact on you also.
Well, it makes perfect sense, really. I mean, it's sort of too much, really,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
yet somehow you have, when I say get through, I know that you're not done, that it's an ongoing thing. I just really want to highlight, um, I'm starting to feel emotional just even thinking about
Mhm.
this, but how you have taken all of this tragedy, all of this pain, all of this struggle, and you've turned it into helping others. And to me, that is the ultimate sacrifice and sense of duty, that you would then take all of that and want to serve other people with the knowledge and experience you have. Tell us how you are doing that.
Well, I wouldn't have chosen to do it by myself. I'm a very private person, and God called me out of that. And he's basically in terms of my blog, choosejoyinthemidst.com, he gave that idea to me, and it was like, Lord, I'm not a writer. I'm a private person. And so then, I knew that God, I've seen miracles happen, and I knew our story wasn't just for us, but I didn't know when that would be able to help others, what we've walked through. And so it's been a slow kind of surrender process for
Mm,
me, of surrendering my comfort in terms of choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to be authentic, choosing to share about my pain, share about our story. We had to get to a more healed place for both of us.
mhm.
We both walked through a lot of EMDR therapy, which is specifically targeted for like trauma and yeah, lots of it can be targeted for other things too. But walked through healing, not that we're fully healed, but
Right.
in a better place, and have grown and learned so much along the way, that we're finally at a place where well, and I know I've shared it with you, but where I am now able to begin to share it in my book,
Mhm.
yeah, for which is for the caregiver of mental crisis.
Okay,
um
so tell us the name of the book because you know what?
oh
That this is
yeah.
part of why I do this truly is to talk to people who it just sounds so silly to show up as you, but it's true. I mean, you are coming on as Amber, somebody who's been through a lot, and you now want to not just impart, but then also, inspire and help others with this grievous thing that you've been through.
Yeah. Um,
So the book is for caregivers.
it is, yes. My book is written for me back then. Um, I
Yeah.
wish I wish I could have had the words that I have written. I'm right now I'm at the stage where I'm editing what the developmental editor already looked at. So the book will come out next year, I think spring 2025. And it had an old title, but that title didn't fit. The new title, as the book has grown and become what it's supposed to be. The book is called The Forgotten Caregiver of Mental Crisis.
Oh,
So yeah, The Forgotten Caregiver of Mental Crisis. And
oh, wow.
the caregiver of mental crisis is forgotten even by themselves, um,
Mm.
because the focus is so strongly on the one who is struggling and who has the suicidal thoughts and
Ah,
attacks and whatnot, that there's such urgency surrounding that person and what they need, that you're kind of on the outskirts. You're doing so much and you're giving everything you have. You're not taking care of yourself because there's not time. And
mm,
typically, you are feeling desperate, you feel alone, and you're not really sure of the way forward, but you're fighting with all you have. Um,
right.
and so you need support. You need a friend to come alongside, which is really what my book is. Yeah.
Right. So in your book, you're not just I don't want to say just, you are telling your story. Within that story, you're also offering guidance and
Mhm. Mhm.
um I'm going to say advice. You're
Mhm.
giving practical things
Yes.
that caregiver can do, and I'm
Mhm.
imagining that self-care is a part of that, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Presently, my book is divided up into three sections. The first part is caring for your loved one. So really focused on that, and um, suicide support and knowledge and whatnot and trauma and such. And then the next part is caring for yourself, the caregiver. And then the last part is kind of like a balanced, looking forward, as the caregiver and the loved one. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it really ends with a lot of hope, right?
it does. And then also kind of how, as hopefully as you both have healed, and which is the desire, how can you navigate that somewhat? Yeah,
Right.
there's some redemption there.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, love it.
yeah.
I love it.
But yeah.
That's gosh, that's kind of the whole point, right? Is to,
Mhm.
like you say, you're not done. We're never done, not till that last breath. And then that's
Yes.
a whole different story altogether. You are in this and you are, like you were saying before, you're at a healed, not as in past
More
tense,
healed
but you're
place. Yeah.
healing. And
Mhm.
maybe we could say a big chunk of it has been achieved. And so now, you both want to share that so that other people can be
Mhm.
helped. I
Yeah.
think it's
Well, and oh,
so
go ahead.
no, I just it's so moving, Amber. What you're doing is
Well,
so
thank
very
you.
moving. I just
Yeah.
taking that pain and turn it into something positive is it's there aren't enough words, or
Mhm.
I just can't fully describe how I feel right now, having had this
Mhm.
conversation.
Well,
Very
thank you for that.
inspired,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
inspired and hopeful, very hopeful for those people out there. Now, where can people find you? Because,
Mhm.
maybe some people can't wait until
Yeah.
spring of next year.
Well, and I just started it so on Instagram, definitely. I think it's on my Facebook, Choose Joy in the Midst. But I have a link and I can share it with you. I have a link for my book interest waitlist already. So it's kind of like the people who really want to know about the book and are hoping to share it with others. And so I have a link for my book interest waitlist. And then on my website, choosejoyinthemidst.com, you can, read my words. You can get on my newsletter. That's the best way. You can get on it through my website, through Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
How often does your newsletter come out? Is it like a predictable, or kind of just whenever you're ready?
About monthly,
Okay.
yeah, when I was in heavy heavy writing of the manuscript, it kind of paused for a little bit of that. But now we are moving forward. My book interest wait list, I actually just sent in the first email out to them today, and I'm hoping to do that weekly, and
Oh,
then the
good.
newsletter more
Good.
once a month,
Yeah,
such like that. Yeah.
that's great. And so
Um,
you and your husband are at a much better place today. And can we ask how he's doing?
He's doing well.
Good.
You know, faith is a big part of his life presently, which is a huge and necessary part of doing well. But also from a mental health perspective, yeah, there's a lot of hope and goodness as I um, look at our life, and while we are trying to grow toward goodness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
In terms of him in the book, I did want to say, because some people will ask me, which is a definite answer or question that should be asked is, what does your husband feel about it? And yeah, he fully believes in the book, and he wants healing for other people also, which is why he is okay with me sharing vulnerably about both of us. That is that's a big responsibility to, to navigate and pray over and try to determine what should be shared. And then obviously ask him, hey, are you comfortable with this?
Right.
So yeah, yeah,
Well, tell him thank you.
yeah.
Thank you from me for sure.
Well,
It takes a lot of courage, and then, but that's how we're going to kind of break down some of the stigma of all of
mhm,
this. He did
mhm.
not ask for this.
No,
He
I
didn't
didn't
ask for
either.
didn't either. And
Nope.
so that's part of, I hate that word, I shouldn't say I hate. I'm not a fan of that normalizing word. I love what it means,
Mhm.
but the word normal,
Normalizing stigma.
there isn't. I just don't think there,
Mhm.
I don't know, we could say average or whatever, but I
Mhm.
mean, I just don't think there's normal, really. I mean, everybody
Mhm.
gets to be whoever they are. but in order to kind of break down some of what goes around
Mm-hmm.
mental,
Yeah,
illness, we need to talk about it. And
we
that's the whole
do.
point for the series.
Mm-hmm. We do need,
Amber, yeah,
yeah,
we need to talk about it. So having
yeah.
conversations like this, I feel are important to get that word out.
Mhm.
And I'm very excited to hear that your book is coming out soon. And we'll have to have you back on
That'd be amazing. Yeah,
when it's,
yeah.
really out there. And so grateful that you've turned all that pain and your husband into something positive that can be really helpful to others.
Mhm. Thank you, Rechelle.
It's been such a pleasure to have you again, Amber. Thank you so much.
And thank you.